Hi, David.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Tyler.
Hello.
Hey, guys. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Well, let's get this started. So, hello, everyone who's joined, and welcome to our Healthcare FinTech webinar series. I'm Natalie Moore with Salucro, and in today's webinar, we're going to discuss how your teams can create a more digital-first healthcare payment experience. We have two incredible technology leaders here today. The first presenter joining us is Tyler Eppley, Vice President and Head of Healthcare Payments at US Bank, and David Schultz, the Chief Operating Officer here at Salucro. We'll be asking a few survey questions along the way, so look for those questions on the right-hand side of your screen. We're also going to be providing you with the most recent Healthcare Payments Insight Report provided by US Bank, as well as a few other takeaways to help you evaluate your technology partners. You can access those resources in the Handouts tab. So, all right, let's get this started. Tyler, I'll hand it over to you for a quick introduction and tell us a little more about US Bank.
Sure. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Good to be with you. Tyler Eppley. I'm in our healthcare payments group within US Bank Payment Solutions, and been here for over 6 years. Excited to be continuing to support such a wonderful institution. Many people are probably aware of who US Bank is, one of the largest banks in the country. I like to share that for the 7th consecutive years, we were ranked one of the most ethical companies by Ethisphere. And so just proud to be a part of this organization. We also own and operate our own payment processor, Elevon. And so we're one of the few banks that does that. And then we have invested heavily in specific industries, healthcare being one. So the people, the technology, the partners that are in and around our healthcare payments division, the company has supported and helped us grow for well over a decade. And so we really do have a tremendous amount of experience and solution sets in this space. And so pleasure to be with you.
And I'll go ahead and introduce myself, David Schultz here, Chief Operating Officer at Salucro. Unlike US Bank, who's a name that everybody knows, and happy to be here with Tyler this afternoon. Salucro is a healthcare technology company. Our team here is exclusively focused on improving the patient payment and billing experience. We've been at it for 16 years. And we do this for both the healthcare providers as well as their patient and guarantor base. We take a complement versus a compete strategy with our partners, our customers, and then their IT systems. So as a result, we offer an extended array of enhanced workflow integrations with leading healthcare provider and EHR systems, while still maintaining a strong focus on providing a retail-like payment experience to the healthcare community. We do that by incorporating your standard payment options, but also being creative both in our workflows and in our partners, and working with such payment types as Care Credit for extended financing, PayPal, and Venmo to really create a payment experience that is as seamless as possible for both providers and their patients.
Great. Thanks, David. So this is sort of our loose agenda. We can see our main themes here. And Natalie mentioned our Healthcare Payments Insight report that just came out, third annual report. And so we're going to be covering some data and trends that we found in the report, as well as things that we are seeing in the industry around optimizing patient engagement, the patient experience, and other implications of that in terms of integration, data security, and so forth. So looking forward to it, and we will go ahead and jump in. So let's see. Let's start with some statistics from the report. So let's start with the middle one. I found that this pretty interesting. So during the pandemic, 65% of patients or consumers reported that they had a telehealth visit. And to put that into perspective, before the pandemic, the report showed that it was less than 10%, I think 9%. So I think that's not too shocking, the fact that We've seen a major increase in telehealth visits during the global pandemic. But what is more important there is that the report also asked, do you want it to continue and expand with the healthcare provider? So those who had a telehealth visit, do you want to keep doing it? In other words, and 69% said yes. So I think that this is another, or one example of many where we're going to continue to see consumers, patients want to continue using technology that they've been exposed to now. These other statistics here basically showing that patients don't want to touch devices. I've always been kind of one of those people, whether it's in the airport, on the airplane, or in a healthcare setting, maybe I don't want to touch things, but I think we'll continue to see greater levels of adoption of contactless payments, and then that 58% of consumers prefer contactless. This is a trend that, again, we've been seeing an uptick, and I think this is just going to continue an acceleration of that, where patients are wanting to continue a contactless payment experience. So, Dave, what do you think? Anything to share on this topic?
It's really interesting. Over the last year and a half, as we're reporting and recording this from our own home offices, the impact that COVID has had overall on just our business. We've seen really just an acceleration of trends that were already in place. I think a lot of people just kind of across the ecosystem would say things that were already happening kind of got put on into high gear and truly accelerating. So some of the statistics you noted certainly kind of speak to that, is really just that increase of telehealth, which quite honestly was something we were talking about back in the 90s, if you can imagine, about how that was going to happen. It was here. We've been waiting for it. Looks like it finally has arrived. Took a little bit of a kick for that to happen, but it's really just an accelerator and an accelerant to a lot of the pieces and parts of the healthcare and healthcare delivery model and financing model. I think that's existed for a long time, but COVID's kind of laid bare and provided a lot of options for us to leverage.
Yep, 100% I agree. Well, so let's move on and talk about some trends. And so I think I'll cover some of the things that we're seeing from a provider perspective. If you want to share some things that you're seeing maybe on the software and partner and vendor side. So what we're hearing a lot is just this notion of wanting to be able to meet consumer demand, deploy the right technology. But we all know in a health system, it's a lot easier said than done. So, what does that really mean in terms of providing the right tools that the consumer is going to want, that they're experiencing in other industries, and doing it in a thoughtful, integrated, secure manner. I also hear a lot of kind of a shift in priorities, and you touched on it a little bit. It's like we've incrementally been seeing increase in adoption of certain tools, and during the pandemic, clients were coming to us and saying, "Hey, we need help with this," and our team was all hands on deck. We were helping clients deploy tools that they needed, whether it was helping people, business office employees work from home and collect payments securely, or portals that they needed to deploy, or whatever. And I know you all similarly have partnered in that similar fashion, but there were other things that the health system acknowledged. Hey, we need to do this. This is making us realize we need to do this, but we just can't do it right now. For example, that deployment of all new devices or something to allow for contactless payments if they hadn't done it yet. So where I'm going with that is I think it's kind of shifted some priorities. They've said to us, hey, as soon as things calm down, these three things are now our new top priorities, whereas before the pandemic started, we had other initiatives taking those spots. So that's kind of some of the things that I'm hearing from a provider perspective.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about data security in a bit, but that is also very top of mind as well. So how do you think?
To echo that, Tyler, is from a vendor perspective, it was really fascinating back in March of 2020. Hard to believe it's more than a year ago. Sometimes it feels like a week ago, but we started receiving a flood of inbound calls from our current and even prospective customers around just capabilities. Can you do this? What if? Everyone was trying to kind of figure out how to operate in kind of what they anticipated was going to be at least a temporary new normal, if not a permanent new normal. And really consulting and working with our clients and customers and even our partners, really we're able to provide kind of a level of solutions and work and navigate through not only the technical landscape and kind of providing solutions for partners to have their employees work from home while still collecting payments, things along that line, still getting on the phone to speak with their patients and guarantors, working out the typical CBO type conversations that occur on a daily basis were now occurring at home. And there was a lot of concern around data and security. And I know we're going to touch on that a little later, but COVID really amped up the visibility into the importance of really being a flexible and modular, provide a modular approach, if I can say, to the patient payment and really patient engagement process overall. Kind of throughout the last year, we've seen a huge increase in just the contactless payments. Like you mentioned, Tyler, whether people are finally realizing, or if you're like me, finally set it up on their phone just because, is taking advantage of that convenience. And but still not abandoning some of the traditional payment methods. So it's really an expansion of offering versus going to a new offering and abandoning anything in the past. A huge increase in contactless payments, up to a quarter, so 25% of those today, and also a really big increase in some of those online money transfer services. So those things such as Zelle, Venmo, and PayPal. According to your report, and when I looked at it, there was a 400% or a 4-time increase from April 2021 to when compared to April 2020. So some of these trends are just really fascinating to kind of look at. It'll be interesting if they stick or if people kind of return back to the new normal. But I think some of these options, some of these conveniences are here to stay. Maybe not at the level that they were during the last year, but certainly that is now becoming kind of the expectation. And I would say the new normal is less on how people interact, but more how providers and vendors provide solutions and work with their clients and their customers to offer a broader set of payment solutions and engagement solutions for their patients.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're throwing out a lot of specific examples. I would add the one thing I'm hearing more is just a more of a formal initiative, enterprise-wide or health system-wide. That it's how the clients are saying, hey, we've been working on some of these things for a while, but now we have been directed to create a digital experience for the patient from a payment perspective at every possible outlet. Let patients pay how, when, and wherever they want. And this is a specific project with expectations around it and timelines. So definitely becoming top of mind and more of a focus.
And kind of tacking on to that, or taking that and expanding on it, is really what we were talking about, is that patient-centric payment experience. Again, leveraging the great report where there's a lot of good things to chew on in there. I want to hone in on that first number, that 70% of consumers who say that they use positive online reviews as crucial when selecting a healthcare provider, which is really interesting. I know I've had the same healthcare provider for longer than I'd like to admit. Back in those days, it was really just talking to friends, which, as we may kind of dismiss online reviews, it's kind of the same thing, right? You go to some site or some set of individuals that you trust and you talk about, like, hey, what's your experience with Dr. So-and-so? And hey, I'll switch to that. But what's really key about online reviews is they're a little more anonymized. You're not aware of who's giving that review. And a lot of times the lasting impact of any experience is the financial experience. So hospitals and healthcare providers spend, and rightfully so, a ton of time into clinical care, quality outcomes, the whole clinical delivery process. And when that's complete, or as that's nearing completion, the shift of the patient engagement really shifts to the financial and the revenue cycle arenas. And we're just as responsible for taking care of our patients and our guarantors. And part of that is certainly customer service and training and all those things we've talked about, right? But beyond that is just the patient billing experience in general. Is it pleasant? Is it easy to understand? Can I engage with it in the way that I want to engage with it? It's a lot of, there's a lot out there that leaves a lasting impression. And so shame on us if we don't take as much care of the patients during their financial journey as we did during their clinical journey.
That's right. Yeah, and that middle bullet was one that really stood out to me. I mean, 46% consumers said the healthcare industry was the most difficult to make a payment. I mean, we're all consumers and patients as well, even though we work in this industry. And I think we've all seen with our utility companies and industries that may not be always considered the most consumer friendly, they're deploying tools every day that are making it easier to pay and stuff like that. So it is interesting. What we asking ourselves, what can we do to make it a better patient experience? To your point earlier, I mean, the idea that a patient, if they have a negative billing experience, they will rank that provider negatively overall, regardless of what their clinical experience was like, is something we've been hearing about for a long time, that our clients are well aware of. What I think is creating an additional challenge is that we're moving the goalpost. The consumer is becoming more aware of new tools and things that make it easier in other industries, and they expect that same type of experience with a healthcare provider. So what do you think?
Yeah, and it's broadening the landscape, right, Taylor? We're not abandoning any of the things in the past. So it's not as if we're trading one for another. It's we're adding to the toolbox, if you will, of just all the different engagement options. So we're not necessarily getting rid of print and mail statements for some group of people, but expanding the outreach for those that may be digital savvy, or for people or consumers who just want to engage kind of at will through the method that they desire. So even kind of a dual or a triple engagement method of digital payments via mobile, sometimes contactless payments, sometimes the standard kind of dip or swipe type card payment, and even the occasional check writing. Those all still exist. We haven't gotten rid of anything. We just kind of, I like exactly what you said, Taylor. We keep moving the goalposts of people in healthcare and in healthcare technology specifically. The world's moving faster sometimes than healthcare technology can react to, because we're responsible for reacting both on the clinical side and the financial side. And with all of the technologies for engagement, the different players that are out there, it's really critical and behooves us to work with our partners and especially our providers to provide kind of as seamless an experience as possible. And that involves a lot of integrations, a lot of kind of working behind the scenes to make that or to enable that seamless experience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree.
And looks like I'm getting a note here. We've got a poll question that we'd like to ask you all. So as we're talking, and as Tyler and I have talked about digital technologies, we're kind of curious for the group that's on the call here today, what digital technologies have your office or health system adopted in the past year? We've talked a lot about various things that have been asked of us, both of us by our customers or prospective clients. I'm curious for the group, what options exist or have been implemented within your organization over the past year. So you see the choices there, A through E, and kind of while that is up and running, wanted to get back to a little more discussion, Tyler, with you. Is you mentioned that digital experience, and the checkout is what do you think? Like, the desire is, obviously, for healthcare to get to more of a true kind of internet savvy retail like experience. It's certainly something that we're striving for. The ability to check out or add or say, you know what, I'm going to pay for this, but not for that today. The flexibility, the ability to finance. When I purchase something, I forget what the amount is, but I'm always offered via my credit card the ability to finance that purchase. How do we enable that, for our customers, our healthcare providers, but also their patients? How do we take an experience that sometimes is pretty painful, and a lot of times not a debt that we incurred by choice, but by necessity? Those are always a little more painful to pay for sometimes, because it's something you may not have planned for. How do we enable the payment for that from a more retail perspective and make that, I've said seamless a bunch of times already during this call, but that's truly what we're after, right? Is that Amazon-like experience where you can choose and engage. You have saved cards on file. It's single step, checkout. Curious what your thoughts are on that, and what you hear from your customers.
Yeah, I mean, well, we talk a lot about how different industries and tools that consumers are using is changing their expectations. I mean, the flip side of it is we're also able to learn from different tools that are out there and not have to reinvent the wheel. And as in healthcare, we always want to be the first to adopt new technology. But if something exists that we can learn from as an industry, that's great. And the telehealth statistic that I was shared earlier, where like the patients used it a lot during the pandemic and they want to keep using it. Something that comes to mind for us here in my family, I mean, we had never used a delivery, like a food delivery app like DoorDash or something like that before the pandemic. I don't know why, we just never did. And so when we used it, and I think we're probably going to keep using it, maybe not nearly as much, but it's once you get used to some convenience, you're likely to keep using it. And I feel that there is a lot of that in healthcare, not just with telehealth and some of the digital tools from a clinical perspective. But if I've already saved my credit card or bank account information or HSA, FSA card in that portal, I'm more likely to go back and can keep expecting that experience, And so, yeah, I think we'll keep learning from other industries. One of the things that comes to mind when you mentioned the Amazon experience, I think it was in like a recent Jerry Seinfeld stand-up special, where he was joking about the one-click order. Like where consumers are so impatient these days. If I have to click twice, I don't even want it anymore. It's like he's a good, funny joke, but there is some truth to that. I mean, we expect things just to be so seamless, quick, and easy. Healthcare providers are recognizing, hey, we need to replicate that type of experience in our patient payment and our non-patient payment environments everywhere where we're interacting with consumers.
And there's a lot of technology that's out there already today that's enabled. One of them, personal experience that with an allergist that I won't go into, but a check-in that I was able to do online at home, paid. I was more just kind of curious to run through the workflow myself. And of course, these workflows exist. We certainly see them with our clients and our customers. Fortunately, I don't have to engage personally in the healthcare experience from beginning to end often. But this year was an interesting year, so I kind of doubled down on it, and it took advantage of some of the online things that providers were pushing me towards to really kind of test it out and see the usability of it. Did it save me time? Potentially. Was it more contactless? Absolutely. More importantly, it was kind of at will. So I just kind of logged in when I wanted to. I think it was probably 11:30 at night, before going to bed, and just checking off a list of things to do. So it's it's really around that flexibility. So did that improve my experience? It was kind of nice to just kind of walk in and say, I'm here. And they looked and said, okay, you're set, go to, and then they roomed me, and then I waited. So it's that, by desire, I engaged in that way, but you still have the traditional ways that exist today for patients. And so it's kind of getting into that check-in. I was talking about walking through the front door, checking in with my allergist is, how do we create a better digital front door, if you will? And what does that really mean? For the longest time, patient portals have been out there for a long time. You've been able to pay with some healthcare providers online for quite a period of time. But is that, the patient portal is no longer an endpoint. I think that was more traditionally like, oh, you send somebody to a patient portal and that's kind of a dead end. They pay their bill and it's gone. It's no longer an endpoint. It's really more of an extension of the brand, of your ability to engage with patients, of your ability to market and also communicate with them. And, how does technology play a role in that digital front door? So, some of the things we've talked about and you see on the screen there is really kind of that integrated user workflow. We talk about EHR compatibility. I think gone are the days, and I think, Tyler, both you and I have lived through the days where we just, people would say, well, that system doesn't talk to that system. So if you want to pay this, you have to go over there, or let me transfer you. No, people are looking for a one-stop shop, similar to the experience that we just talked about. We may not be sitting on our couch ordering our healthcare necessarily, but we certainly want to log into one portal, speak to one person, go to one place to be able to kind of handle our financial experience. Certainly I see towards the end we have security that kind of, I think, underlies everything, and that's something that makes the healthcare space considerably more unique than just kind of a standard retail experience, and has often been used kind of as an excuse for, well, we can't do that because. And so I'm curious, Tyler, from your perspective, on the provider side, of course, on the vendor side, security compliance, that's something we have to live and breathe every day in our space. Does that visibility, what do you think about that visibility from the provider space? Are people talking about that, or is that just something that they have to check the box on? Or
well, I think you summarized this very well, and so the way I would just kind of add that the way I think of this sometimes is just about how much the patient journey has evolved, and how payments is built into that evolution. And so, the idea of showing up at a doctor's office and filling out paper forms on a clipboard, that's going away more and more every day. And so is the payment experience and the different tools, going back to paying how, when, and where the patient wants.
Yeah.
How do we deploy that in a secure manner? The more tools we extend, or the more payment channels we open up, how do we make sure they're secure, compliant? So I think, so you're exactly right that we're hearing that more and more. P2PE validated, that's our standard methodology for deployment these days, because top of mind for providers, they're adopting that level of security more and more, and we're seeing patient accounting systems begin to want to require that too. So definitely more of a focus there. Yeah. Well, oops, did I go too far?
No, I think you're good. Yep.
Okay. So we are at our next poll question. So let's go through that, if you don't mind selecting. So does your patient portal offer a modernized user experience? Yes, no, or not sure. Please, if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to share your thoughts there. And then moving on to the conversation here, you touched on this, Dave, about the extension of the brand. That's how I look at some of, or all of these tools. But this topic here, definitely an example of where you're providing a consumer-friendly payment channel and experience, and how are you letting the patient know, that one, the tool is available, the functionality is there for them, and how intuitive and easy it is, but showcasing other messaging and branding as well. So like a marketing carousel, if you will, on the patient portal, or some of the messages that can be displayed. In our report, 37% of patients want their providers to optimize the patient portal. So we're seeing more patients use it, and a significant number of people share that they want that experience to be optimized. What are your thoughts on this in this arena?
Yeah, it's Tyler. It's interesting that you bring up that statistic, because I think that kind of goes. It speaks to what these patient portals used to be and look like. Not that long ago, actually. 10, 15 years, they were just these kind of graveyard dead ends that people would have to navigate to or through, and it was more of an achievement that you were able to make a payment online than it was a simple process that was easy for you to do. So part of that is an extension of the brand from a marketing perspective, but also from a usability perspective. If your technology is difficult to use, does that say anything about your brand? Even if that's not necessarily the provider's technology or website that they're managing, but it's certainly an extension of their brand. And so you have to be kind of aware and cognizant of that. Are you enabling the ability to just, sometimes I'm a little guilty of not wanting to create a profile on every website and enter my email and then do a password with, I can't tell you how many times I've reused the same password across, multiple sites, right? Is just making a quick payment. So yeah, I want to do this online, but I just want to kind of quickly make a payment without creating a whole profile, pay this bill, and then be on my way. How can providers facilitate that type of experience? Because then making things easier is an extension of the brand, in addition to being able to communicate kind of values. We've had some providers that were even communicating during COVID, kind of COVID payment policies, the availability of COVID testing within their patient portal, just to use that as kind of another communication layer. Certainly not the only one, but an extension of what they have on their standard websites as a payment portal is, a place sometimes where, or sometimes the only place for a healthcare provider where patients go, if they're kind of self-sufficient otherwise. So it's been interesting to see this whole kind of landscape evolve, not just over the last year, but really over the last, I don't know, what would you say, 10 to 15 years? It's been.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I mean, we've seen more clients that have a patient portal, but the question is it integrated with everything else that they're doing, right? Not just from posting into the patient accounting or practice management system, but also do you have like an integrated platform that operates across all the different payment channels, instead of just solving for that one payment channel and then figuring out a solution for the others. And then clearly inside of the clinical portal, inside of MyChart and other tools, enabling that payment integration obviously has evolved quite a bit over the years, and so that certainly can make for a better payment experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think kind of holistically, it's just about taking the putting the onus on ourselves to make our customers' lives easier, which sometimes in healthcare is a bit of, or has been, a change of attitude for some providers, and certainly for, I think, the industry kind of writ large, is you're here because you have to be here, and now it's shifted to, we want you to be here, we want you to engage with us in every way, shape, and form possible, to from a patient loyalty perspective. The market's become very competitive in the healthcare space too, so we're I think we're finally treating consumers in healthcare like consumers in any other industry, in that they can kind of walk and go somewhere else, and because of all the options that are available to them and the ability to just kind of get resources and search online and do what we talked about a little bit earlier, right? Which is let me see the providers in my area within a 25-mile radius who has the highest ratings. If I'm not satisfied with you, you know what? I'm not that loyal to you. I can go somewhere else. The times have surely changed in that realm, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. We've been talking about consumerism and price transparency and the patient out-of-pocket increasing and all of the factors that are contributing to that shopping around and patients becoming more consumer-like. But you're absolutely right. Everything we're talking about from an experience standpoint, every touch point in that journey has to be supportive of building that patient loyalty 100%. All right, well, let's keep going here. So this is some more data from the Payments Insights report.
Mm-hmm.
We actually had quite a bit of data or questions and information and data gathered on data security. So we broke that out, created a little sub report. But it's very consumer focused in terms of what the patient is thinking on this topic. And so that was eye-opening for me to see some of this data. We talk a lot about securing the organization, the health system, and protecting data from that perspective. And don't want to lose sight of the fact that patients are very concerned about this too, their own data, right? So that's what we're talking about when we're protecting that data. So the data or the support, the results in the report certainly support that. I mean, you can see 55% of patients are worried about paying and making sure that that's secure. So I look at this as one, deploying tools and making sure that everything's secure to protect that data. But if you are doing that correctly and with the right partner, use that to build your brand and build that patient loyalty as well, right? And letting the patients know that you're an organization that takes that seriously. Is that how you look at that, or what are your thoughts?
I was kind of surprised by that number being that high. I mean, certainly security is always kind of in the back of all of our minds as we're transacting things online. But that was in some ways happily surprised, because that's certainly something that on the vendor side we tout. We spend a lot of time, treasure, blood, sweat, and tears on ensuring that things are locked down and secure in the highest methods possible, whether that's through certification and compliance and all the things that are part of that kind of security ecosystem. But I think part of that is even maybe or potentially just you think of what's also happened in the last year. Take COVID out of the equation, but there's been a ton of just online scams, the cyber attacks. You think of not just the standard stuff that people hear about and the scams and all the crank calls that you get on your mobile phone with people trying to get your information, is the cyber attacks. So are your suddenly the partners that you're working with, that you're paying with, the SolarWinds piece, where that basically went into every nook and cranny for a lot of organizations. And so part of that is really how do we secure that data? And it looks like that data point almost seems like it's kind of a logical outcome from a consumer perspective of everything that's been going on. And it's not just the last year, I would say the last 2-3 years of just hacks and attacks and things, ransoms that have gone on, not just in the healthcare space, but kind of across the board. And we have healthcare is just, and also healthcare and financial transactions and the revenue cycle, reside in this really kind of tricky crossroads, right? Of both financial data and also PHI, personal or protected health information. And then you have PCI, which is the payment card industry, and all the protections and regulations that they have around that from transacting. There's just a ton going on in this space and at this crossroads. of sensitive data. So healthcare providers, we've certainly seen it, as I mentioned kind of earlier in the call, back in March of 2020, a lot of healthcare providers asking us about our encryption methods, even though this was something that, we communicate from the onset. It's kind of, a calming effect just to hear from their partners that, yes, we're fully, the solution you have is P2PE, and we're fully certified, and just to kind of calm the nerves of this new world that we're going into. But it's interesting. I even have an article here from a couple weeks ago from Crane Chicago. I'm out of Chicago, and it's about the rising cyber insurance. Insurance for kind of cyber attacks for businesses has gone up 35% over the last year. So that's a Crane's article. So I think depending on the metro area you are, that's probably one of those articles that'll be spread across all of those. But it's kind of fascinating. 35% in 1 year on insurance premiums, just because of the cost of ransomware and what that's doing, not just to the healthcare industry. We're among a lot of other unfortunate friends in this area, but I think we're certainly higher when it comes to just potential for attack. And so when we talk about that, I think part of the natural follow-on question to that is really, what is the proper security approach? And I think you and I, Tyler, have thrown across a couple buzzwords, right? P2PE and PCI and PHI, and healthcare lives in the, as we used to joke, healthcare lives in the TLA world, the 3-letter acronym world. But there's a key difference, getting a little bits and bytes on you just for a minute. A key difference in PCI compliant, which is absolutely critical, but a P2PE solution offering. And the key thing, the key differentiator with P2PE is that data, that card data, is encrypted from the point of entry. So, for example, even in our system, it's something that we have no record of. It's just a token that is passed kind of through our system. So there's no ability to hack in or to decrypt that along that chain of custody as that card information is passed throughout. And so what we've seen is just a higher demand for that now being kind of the de facto solution that people go with. I think a couple of years ago, 5-6 years ago, that used to be a differentiator where people would say, oh, well, that's interesting, but what does that get me? Kind of getting back to that ransomware conversation is, forbid that, anything happens, but that having a P2PE solution and being fully kind of outside of the scope of card numbers is just one less thing for chief information security officers at hospitals and health systems to worry about, because Lord knows they all have a ton to worry about already as it is. Does that match, from what we're hearing, does that match what you're hearing on the street as well from your providers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is becoming more of a focus where, several years ago, even though we were deploying P2PE validated, quote unquote, solutions, there was a lot more confusion or just education required. Like, what is that, and what does that really mean? Whereas now we're seeing more health systems saying, do you check this box, and in all these environments to support us. So definitely seeing more of a focus there, and I do still see a lot of clients that are saying, either not only help us understand what that is or what we can do here, but what are other clients doing, and that's true not just with data security, but with anything, right? We are always happy to share what we're seeing across the industry and what innovations and things that are happening. And we also have exposure to information that a lot of health systems don't. The PCI Council has allowed for there to be statistic or guidelines and information out there, so we don't have to educate everyone on what it is. But how our solutions are meeting those requirements and what else the health system can be doing and making recommendations around that. Certainly, we're seeing more discussion around. So, yeah.
Good to hear our stories match up.
Yeah.
I know we're getting towards the end of our hour here, and I know part of what we want to talk and help the folks online about is really just what are the next steps? How do we choose the right technology? Where do I go from here? What do health systems, what do providers need to move forward to become truly digital and consumer friendly? We spent a lot of time at the very end talking about kind of security and compliance. I would say that's certainly kind of the base level that you want to operate from. The digital or pop into like a smartphone or an iPad type card swipe is considerably less secure than a P2PE type solution. So different types of risk involved in transmitting that data, and so certainly security is one of the considerations you want to take into account. But more importantly, kind of like what we were talking about in the beginning, is really the ability for some of that advanced patient engagement. So start off with technology that is simple and straightforward. And then really kind of work through that and understand the needs and desires of your consumers. Generally, the consumers in healthcare are no different. Maybe the distribution of them may be different given on a specific geography or specialty of type of hospital. But consumers are consumers. They want to engage in every kind of transaction. I would say in somewhat of a similar method. So understand and see if the partner or the solution that you're working with can support that. Certainly, Tyler, you were talking about integration a little earlier, and we mentioned DHRs and kind of that single point of contact was something that came up. Is integration possible between your data and your systems, or are you just risking spinning up another siloed solution that you're going to have somebody in the back office kind of work in a manual or semi-manual process to make it look integrated? Certainly less than ideal. Resources are at a critical minimum within healthcare, revenue cycle, and IT staff. And then, something we've, I think, really stressed kind of throughout this time is, emphasize something that's truly seamless or offers kind of that seamless experience with consumers versus continuing to rely on all these kind of Rube Goldberg type contraptions that exist either on the front end or sometimes on the back end to make it appear seamless. Is it seamless more so out of the box? And then bring in outside partners to elevate that consumer-facing digital experience and capabilities. When you have, because obviously, Tyler, your customers are not just customers in patient payments, but tend to have a broader, kind of more holistic financial experience with US Bank and Elevon. Is what do you advise your health system customers on specific to the patient and patient engagement experience when it comes to that part of the financial and the treasury discussion?
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you. You summarized that very well. What I would say is what it boils down to is just having the right partners. I mean, that's what we're hearing more is whether it's during the pandemic and the most unexpected things are happening, but we have a partner who's ready to deploy the technology that we need and do it securely and integrated with our patient accounting systems and EMRs. That's an example where on the fly we had the tools available, but also holistically, yes, you're exactly right. You could have one nice tool that you could deploy, but is it integrated with everything? Is it creating more work for staff, or is it exposing the organization to risk? That goes a lot broader than just patient payments. So is that partner able to support you in those other areas, treasury management, any receivables on the payer side, automating as many and as much things as possible, and bringing the same level of data security and support and relationship stability that they would expect. So
Yeah.
we do see a lot of clients coming to us for that, yeah, and expanding patient engagement, and how and when the patient wants to pay, right? So it's all tied together.
So kind of with that, before we wrap this up, let's take a few questions. Looks like a few questions that came in during the presentation. So I'm not wearing my glasses.
Yeah, I'll read those questions for you, Dave. All right, so the first question that came in today, we'll give this one to you, David. If I'm starting from square one with online payments, is there a starting point that's most important to consider?
I think really, we touched on it kind of quite a bit, Tyler and I, in the call, is for online payments, obviously security is always, that's just an expectation. So you want to make sure, you're working with somebody that can demonstrate, not just through their words, but actually through like certifications, whether you talk about high trust, SOC certifications, PCI certifications. Those are the types of things that are just kind of out of the box for a lot of reputable online payment facilitators in this space. And then kind of beyond that, I would say it's really about a lot of the things that we talked about a bit earlier, is the ability to customize and kind of extend the brand, both from a usability perspective, right? Is it easy to use? Is it straightforward? And also the ability to kind of extend the marketing and communication component within that portal. Did I answer that?
Sounded good to me. Thank you. We've got time we'll do two quick questions here. Tyler, how about one for you? What do you think has been the most in-demand digital technology?
Ooh, the most in-demand digital technology. Well, I think probably mobile payments, just consumers being able to pay from a mobile phone easily, and then from the provider perspective, being able to meet that demand, with it in an integrated and secure fashion, like we were talking about. The other thing that I think I would add to that is related to just patient billing. The level of, kind of like David mentioned. I mean, print and mail statements we're still going to be generating those, and those aren't going to go away. But the level or the rate at which patients and consumers are opting out of paper and expecting everything to be digital, from that experience is also been in high demand, and we'll continue to see that trend, I think.
Thank you. And last question, what role will hardware devices play in the future? And how do we meet new demands without forgetting about the needs of our older generations?
So who gets that question?
Let's go. That goes to David, but Tyler, if you have anything to add to it, please do.
So what was the last half of that?
How do we meet the demands without forgetting about our older generations? So maybe who aren't as tech savvy.
I'll have to challenge whoever asked that question, because there are some older generation folks that are more tech savvy than I am. However, I understand kind of the root of the question is really kind of how do we move forward without leaving the less tech savvy people behind. Taylor, you just kind of touched on that, right? Print and mail statements aren't disappearing. For some people, they may. For some people, they may elect to go completely electronic. Some may want both, right? You check out at Home Depot, you can get your paper and your electronic. receipt. Some people want both. It's really not anything that's going away. And from a hardware perspective, there are things, like those, like the point of sale or point of service devices that allow for NFC type payments, so you can just use your Apple Pay or your Google Pay and come up to it. But that still doesn't limit the dip and swipe type components. What I would suggest is any hardware that eliminates a previous type of interaction, you probably would want to avoid. It's not about swapping one for one, but more kind of expanding the scope of offerings. What do you think, Kyle?
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you mentioned earlier, a lot of what we're talking about across all of these different topics is kind of in addition to. We're not replacing something; we're adding a new tool, which creates complexity. But that's a good example of where the devices that are being deployed today allow for Apple Pay, Google Pay, all the functionality that certain consumers might want and expect, but you can still use it in a traditional fashion as well. So you're not limiting that patient population that would expect that. I would also add, it's been interesting to see kind of an increase in adoption of kiosks and tablets for check-in, and then maybe the pandemic has slowed, some of the expansion of those types of tools. So we'll have to see, how that shakes out in the end, especially given kind of the, check-in and patient journey starting before the patient arrives. But from a hardware perspective, I would kind of categorize that or, lump that in the same category. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. I don't think the tablets are gone. I certainly love when I had some orthopedic appointments, being able to answer all those questions on a tablet versus going through that paper. What is that stack of 12 sheets of paper, Tyler, that I think maybe you're familiar with too at some point. So I don't think those are going away, but kind of to your point, the pandemic may have slowed that out or maybe put it at a pause, but I think those are going to be roaring back.
Yeah. It's a hybrid approach.
Exactly.
All right, guys. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so that's enough Q&A for today. But thank you so much for joining us. Again, thanks to Tyler and David for leading us through this webinar. If you want to learn more about Salucro or US Bank, please check out the links and the attachments that we'll be sending to you after this webinar. So thanks again, guys. Have a great week.
Thanks.
Thank you. You too.